Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and thank you for tuning in to Canal Algérie's Nightly News. I'm your host, it is Yasud Qawi, and here are the headlines.
لا بد من وقف حمام الدم والإبادة التي يتعرض لها الفلسطينيون.
Algeria calls for an immediate cessation of bloodshed and genocide in Palestine during the meeting held by the UN as requested by Algeria. An intense bombardment on Gaza and Khan Yunis amid a humanitarian tragedy heralding a serious famine in the Palestinian territories. The Algerian-Chinese cooperation is expected to witness an unprecedented boom following the recommendations of the Bilateral Joint Commission. The acute thirst crisis is facing the Makhzen regime, still unable to provide fundamental solutions to an ever-deteriorating social situation. Welcome back. We begin with tonight's breaking story. The proceedings of the UN security meeting requested by Algeria began on Wednesday in New York to debate the decision of the International Court of Justice relating to the provisional measures imposed against the Zionist entity in its barbaric aggressions against the Palestinian people. The gist of the speech delivered by Algeria's representative to the UN in this concise report compiled by Salim Mirah.
لا بد من وقف حمام الدم والإبادة التي يتعرض لها الفلسطينيون.
Taking the floor, Algeria's representative to the UN, Ammar Benjama, underscored that this meeting is being held while the aggressions against the Palestinian people have been taking place for almost 5 months. And following the ICJ's hearing of the case filed by South Africa, a decision denoting that the time of impunity has come to an end. The UN and the international community are committed to ensure that no criminal can escape sanctions, and the occupier must not be an exception to the rule. Ammar Benjama pointed out that this is of an utmost importance to guarantee the accountability in order to protect the future generations from the atrocities such as those being perpetrated in Gaza, quoting the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, saying that history will take down the names of those behind that genocide, including war criminals and enemies of life. The same speaker called for the implementation of the provisional measures to protect the Palestinian people, adding that the occupying power has to comply with the measures agreed upon. The international community has to shoulder its responsibility to put an end to bloodshed via an immediate ceasefire, otherwise its desolation and destruction in Gaza now deprived of health infrastructure and basic services.
إن التدابير التحفظية التي أقرتها محكمة العدل الدولية لا يمكن تطبيقها إلا من خلال وقف إطلاق النار.
Algeria's representative to the UN concluded by urging the UN Security Council to take the necessary measures and without delay so that the voice of justice is heard, calling, by the way, the occupiers to supply the essential services and provide the humanitarian aid to battered Gaza.
This comes after the Security Council unanimously voted in favor of a draft press release at the initiative of Algeria in order to expand the flow of humanitarian aid to Palestine. This is in the framework of Algeria's continuous and permanent efforts in order to mobilize support for the Palestinian cause, and in line with the instructions of the head of state, Abdelmajid Tebboune. The document also urges all parties to cooperate with the senior coordinator in charge of humanitarian action and reconstruction of Gaza, Sigurd Kach, and to facilitate mission as stipulated in the resolution 2720. As for the developments of the situation on the ground in Gaza, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry called in a communique for the formation of an international field team to investigate the Zionist massacres in Gaza. The same communique added that according to testimonies of Palestinians, over 30 decomposed bodies of Palestinian martyrs were discovered buried in northern Gaza. They were killed while they were handcuffed and blindfolded. The Foreign Ministry considered that this is clear evidence that the martyrs were executed on the ground ground, adding that there are others that speak of a larger number than mentioned in the most heinous forms of genocide committed by the occupation forces against Palestinian people in Gaza Strip without accountability or oversight. Using all forms of violation and aggression against Palestinians in their own land wasn't enough for the Zionist occupier, as it pressured the UN's Relief and Work Agency for Palestinian refugees to put an end to its humanitarian aid, leading to the suspension of funding of 13 countries to this agency. What are the repercussions of this action and how did Palestinians react? Answers with Melissa Kebash.
Many countries have decided to suspend their funding to the UNRWA. Faced with the Zionist pressure, the number of countries have increased this weekend from 3 to 13. Depriving the UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees of financial resources would only worsen the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, always deteriorating.
وقف هذا التمويل هو يعطل من عمل المؤسسة الدولية الذي
The suspension of this funding hinders the mission of the international organization that worked on the ground for more than 60 years. This will have negative repercussions on the 5 regions where Palestinian refugees are settled. Thousands of Palestinian refugees will be negatively impacted by this situation.
The UNRWA confirmed in its reports that the occupier's army killed 152 of its employees while destroying dozens of its local schools and health centers. Despite this, the agency continues its humanitarian mission, providing aid for more than 1,700,000 displaced ever the beginning of the aggression.
فضل من الله أول حاجة ومن ثم المساعدات اللي بتجينا من الأنروا. طب راحت الأنروا من وين بدنا نلاقي طحين من وين بدنا نلاقي أكل.
With the withdrawal of the UNRWA aid, how can we feed our children? The conditions here are very difficult. How can the agency reduce its services? It took a commitment to help the Palestinian people.
بضلني ماشي مع الشعب الفلسطيني لما يعود لدياره هيك متفق عليه.
Since the beginning, the Zionists openly planned to put an end to the agency's work, created after the Nakba of 1948 to help refugees. The agency's name became linked to the right of return.
ما زلت لاجئة وبحمل كرت التموين. ما زلت بحمل كرت التموين.
I am a refugee and I still have my ration card. It's my right to have access to all services as well as my son and grandson.
القضية ونرجع لوطننا كأهل وطن مش لاجئين. ترفع عنا قضية اللاجئين لا ترفع إلا بالعودة.
The Zionist occupier has used all kinds of weapons to cleanse Gaza from its inhabitants, and this with the blessing of Western powers.
In a separate development, the Premier Nadir Al-Arbawi chaired a cabinet meeting devoted to the examination of a set of sectoral presentations related to the preparation for the holy month of Ramadan, especially with regard to the implementation of solidarity measures and the supply and organization of the market and the abundance of products of wide consumption, in addition to the rational management of water resources, hygiene conditions, and the proper functioning of various facilities and services. The government also listened to a presentation on the national strategy for the production and storage of fuel within the framework of energy security aimed at ensuring the optimal utilization and development of refining capacities, proactively responding to the growing demand for this material, as well as diversifying exports in accordance with the directives of the President of the Republic during the meeting of the Council of Ministers on the 7th of the current month. The government also listened to a presentation on the national strategy to address climate change in their various dimensions and reduce its repercussions. The government has also approved the draft executive decree on the implementation of projects in the framework of the concretization of a national program for seawater desalination decided by the President of the Republic in water security. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, received today the President of the National Assembly of Madagascar, Christine Razano Mohasso. The meeting was an occasion to review the bilateral relations and means and ways of nourishing them. As for Algerian-Italian cooperation and the concretization of the commitments of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, and his Italian counterpart, Sergio Mattarella, meant to promote bilateral cooperation between both countries in different fields of common interest, the Algerian Interior Minister, Brahim Merad, received the Italian Interior Minister, Matteo Piantedosi, now on an official visit to Algeria. In Algerian-Chinese cooperation, on the sidelines of his participation in the 8th session of the Joint Algerian-Chinese Commission for Economic, Trade and Technical Cooperation, the Minister of Housing, Urban Planning in the city, Tariq Belaribi, met his Chinese counterpart, Ni Hong. Both parties reviewed dossiers of cooperation and overall the topics discussed by experts of the Commission. They have agreed that Chinese companies specialized in construction will accompany many projects under achievement, notably of the new city Bougazour and Limnia, in addition to the support of Chinese experts to their Algerian counterparts in order to update Algerian seismic rules. Explanations were given by the Ministry of Housing on the advanced technologies used in the construction of new Chinese megalopolis Cheonggan, as well as novelties of the sector of agriculture, and the Academy of Agriculture and Forestry suggested the possibility of offering trainings to Algerian executives active in the domain. On to the operational report of the People's National Army's activity in the past week. In the context of the fight against terrorism, detachments of the People's National Army arrested 7 support elements to terrorist groups during separate operations. In the framework of the fight against organized crime, the continuation of the tireless efforts aimed at countering the scourge of drug trafficking in our country, combined detachments of the PNA intercepted in coordination with the different security services in operations across the military regions 57 drug traffickers and averted attempts to introduce 12 quintals and 57 kilograms of processed kief through the borders with Morocco, while 211,800 psychotropic tablets were seized. In Tamras, Borjbeji Mukhtar, in Saleh and Janet, detachments of the People's National Army arrested 95 individuals and seized 33 vehicles, 186 generators, 144 jackhammers, 50 quintals of mixture of raw gold and stones, in addition to quantities of explosives, detonation tools, and other equipment used in illegal gold mining operations. On the other hand, 36 other individuals were arrested and 8 hunting rifles, a big quantity of munition of different calibers, in addition to 22,000 liters of fuel, as well as 168 tons of foodstuffs intended for smuggling and speculation, and 5.5 quintals of tobacco, in addition to 175 quintals of copper waste, 26 quintals of tobacco, and 345,700 units of pyrotechnical articles were seized during separate operations across the national territory. Similarly, border guards thwarted at the level of our national coast attempts at illegal immigration and rescued 231 individuals aboard traditionally made boats, while 569 illegal immigrants of different nationalities were arrested across the national territory. An acute thirst crisis is facing Morocco, heralding a serious social unrest unlikely to topple the Makhzen regime, so far indifferent of the citizens' daily problems and focusing its efforts to plunder the country's wealth and natural resources. More insights compiled in this informative report.
مشروع نظام المخزن الوهمي لحل أزمة العطش يضحك المغاربة. انظروا من استنزف المياه.
According to many Moroccans, the policy and project adopted by the Makhzen to solve the water shortage crisis is ridiculous and fake. In an attempt to calm the Moroccan people's anger and rage, the Makhzen announced the building of the biggest water desalination station in the continent.
أعلن المخزن عن بناء أكبر محطة لتحلية مياه البحر في القارة. نعم، هكذا روج للكذبة الكبيرة.
دائما هكا، دائما هكا، دائما احنا عايشين على التمر، عايشين على التمر.
الناس ناعسة وأنا كنفكر في الكسيبة ديالنا وكنفكر في والديا كيموتوا بالعطش. علاش؟ باش حنا ماشي من حقنا نشربوا الماء.
Knowing that the two companies building this so-called imaginary project of $1.5 billion are both owned by Prime Minister Aziz Akhnouch.
وتقدر ب1.5 مليار دولار.
وأنا أقول دائما أن حكومة عزيز أخنوش هي حكومة شركات.
هادشي أخنوش، سيدنا وسيدك الرسول الله، أنت أخنوش ماشي أخنوش.
In addition to that, the plant will only be functional by 2030.
مزيان تعبئة موارد جديدة للماء، ولكن نهار الجمعة داز صفقة 15 مليار درهم لشركات رئيس الحكومة في تضارب للمصالح وضرب للحكامة. ماذا تقولون؟
علاش الثروة ديال أخنوش بقات غادا طالعة؟
A deteriorating situation that keeps worsening, especially with the serious thirst facing the Moroccan people.
كنوض حتى الصباح وقسموا لك بالله فاش كنوض الصباح ما كنلقى حتى نقطة ما نجبدها وقسموا لك بالله راه ربي اللي شاهد عليه كنضاربوا عليه. عرفتي الناس اللي قدوا يسهروا حدا البير راه كيسهروا كيتسناو بنقطة حتى تخرج.
المشكل راك عارف الماء المشكل كامل بصفة عامة في المغرب كامل.
Despite the thirst crisis threatening the country, the Makhzen continues to plant cannabis and avocado, both consuming large amounts of water.
العطش التي تهدد البلاد بانفجار اجتماعي واقتصادي.
أنا شوف بنت لكم هذا الافوكادو هي اللي فيها البركة، خليوها.
Regardless of its people's needs and demand, the Makhzen is determined to pursue its activity within this field alongside its Zionist investors.
The end. Thank you to our technicians and journalists, and thank you for watching. Take care.